and welcome to another episode of History of Westeros podcast, a podcast dedicated to George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire book series, as well as HBO's Game of Thrones. As you know, this is our Game of Thrones series, so it's largely just all about the show, though we do have a spoilers section at the very end where we talk about book spoilers.
Stuff related to the show, of course, but how it ties into the books, maybe things that we learn on the show that we can apply to the books later, or maybe not. All that, of course, after the credits, as Ashea said. Hello, everybody. Welcome again to History of Westeros podcast. We're excited to be talking about episode 6, Laws of Gods and Men. A great episode, very focused and a little tighter than a lot of other episodes, with some great visuals and, of course, some great acting, as we've come to get used to. On my left is Ashea, also known as Asha Yara. Mm-hmm. Appropriately for this episode, we'll be talking a bit about the Ironborn and the Greyjoys and all that.
Asha Yara.
Asha Yara, exactly. Talking about her specifically. And on my right here is Sansa Stark. It's important that we have a Stark in this episode, as there are no Starks in this episode. The first episode of Game of Thrones on HBO without a Stark in the entire episode.
Game of Thrones on TBS still had Stark.
Yes, all the other networks, Game of Thrones, yes, they don't drop Starks for any reason. So, a few notes before we get started. A lot of great discussions have been happening on our forums, which we've only launched within the last few months. A nice community is building up there, and I wanted to give a few shout-outs to some of our users who have gotten things going. In particular, Darren T, Stapiricon, Webswinger, Vaxis, Boston Sock 704, Sir Canute, Saggins, Sensante, Logain, Sweetift. I don't know how that's how some of these I'm probably pronouncing wrong. Sweetie FT, I don't know how to say that one. And Neproc. Thanks a lot, guys and girls, for getting us started over there. We read everything that's there. We don't always respond to money. So, enough of that. Let's get started with the actual episode. Starts off with a beautiful opening. We have the Titan of Braavos and Stannis' ship sailing through the narrow sea. It's just amazing.
To be fair, we have something before even that is very interesting, which is that Braavos is added to the opening credits.
You're right. You're right. The opening
Aziz
credits.
And I were just like hands in the air. We were not visibly cheering, but we were, cheering.
We were excited. That was
very
great.
Excited.
See the little coin going down the thing there. That was great. Yeah, that great little intro. Addition to the intro there. Probably right now the intro is as cool as it's ever been. With you got the Dreadfort in there and Marine and the Harpy and everything. So looking good, guys. Looking really good.
So right off the bat, we then see the Titan in real life. That's where it opens up.
Now, I've seen the episode a few times, and we saw that preview for the Titan ahead of time. Mm-hmm. The Titan always caught my eye. I couldn't take my eyes off of it. But if you look behind the Titan, it's really amazing also. The sprawl of the city is beautiful. You got the waterways represented nicely. CGI team, 2 thumbs up there to those guys. Whatever they're doing back there, I have no idea how that all works, but it's beautiful. Great job.
We should have switched out our maps for a map of Braavos.
That's true.
I thought, if you've ever seen it in the Lands of Ice and Fire book, they have a map of Braavos of the city, and I felt like what they did was very similar to what I imagined. Even in just the color grading that they use, the color tone of it, it's blue and gray, and that's what they showed it as. Whereas King's Landing is all orange and red, and that they do that color grading for different locations in the show. But even just the little bits of architecture we saw looked like how I imagined Braavos based on that map.
So the main focus of this scene, of course, is the Iron Bank and Stannis and Davos. Now, this is a bit of some people are a little put off by Stannis being a supplicant. In the book, this seems like something that wouldn't be in his wheelhouse. He's very proud, and even when he clearly needs this sort of help, it's not necessarily what some people picture book Stannis doing. But remember, folks, this is not book Stannis. He's a different character. This is TV Stannis. He's not the same guy. He's similar. They're cousins. So we can't keep bringing to the front expectations that we've had for a character that is clearly not this character. He's not this person that has the same level of pride. He has pride. He has a lot of it. But he doesn't have the same set of characteristics as Book Stannis has. So, this is my personal advice. Don't set yourself up to be disappointed by maintaining expectations that have already been dashed long ago. We've seen that this is not the same character. But it's an interesting scene. It's a great scene anyway. I like how they set the Iron Bank up. I like that these bankers are they're not, it's not one person, and they have this sort of attitude that's very serious but very kind of soft at the same time. Sean, since this is the most new to you, of course, being an Unsullied TV viewer, what were your impressions of this scene? You had less expectations built up than we did.
Follow-up question: how does it feel to be constantly referred to as an Unsullied?
Is it unmanning?
I'm comfortable with my manhood. Well, a couple things. One, I want to just talk about Stannis a little bit here because I'm drawn to his character, and some other people I talked to about him. Generally speaking, they seem to not like him, and I'm probably thinking a little bit more people like me who's seen his show and not read the books. I'm not quite sure what people's perspective of having read the books. I feel like most people do like him.
I think a lot of people respect him. Maybe not like,
Yeah.
maybe not ideally the best descriptor, but a lot of people do like him. You're right.
But I've been trying to like size him up, if you will, and I have this instinct to defend him to people who I think are able to attack him pretty easily because he can seem so wishy-washy, you know. And I see that, but I feel he also is a man of principle, and I don't know how to like reconcile those.
What?
And the closest I've come to is he's in just new territory. He's had these ideas of what he thinks is right and how things should be, and he's stuck to them his whole life. And now he's presented with this power of this god that he can hardly conceive of, and the idea that he's supposed to be king, and he's just trying to take it all in, and he can't deny certain truths coming from Melisandre. But Davos is also a man he knows he should trust. You know what I mean? And so they're giving him different bits of advice, and when he takes advice and changes his mind to the other way, it might seem like he's being wishy-washy, but in a way I almost think that he's being, I don't know quite how to describe it, but wise. Like Tywin said, he's like listening to the advice of his council. How many other characters have not listened to the advice of their council and done poorly because of it? You know,
Stannis listens to counsel.
Right. That said, yeah, on some level, I think there's certain lines he won't cross, but like burning his family members doesn't seem to be one, but having his child beaten does seem to be one. So anyway, the Iron Bank now, my thoughts on that are, it's kind of new for them to be presenting this to us. I mean, a couple hints, maybe like one per season, a mention of the Iron Bank or debt that
it's not totally out of nowhere, but it hasn't been fully explained yet.
Compared to, say, zombies are coming or dragons are coming, these are things that we know for sure, these looming threats.
Bankers are coming.
Yes, and I'm more scared of that.
Bankers are more frightening in a lot of ways.
I feel like they're this force that's out there that's potentially has the ability to overthrow a kingdom that we're getting a glimpse of now, and I'm wondering, who are the players behind this force? Are we going to see more of them? I don't know if this is just a scene we had, Stannis has got the money and he's going back home, or if we're going to keep seeing that guy up there telling Davos, you want to be a lord where I come from. I wonder if that character or other characters from the Iron Bank or from Bravos might come to the surface.
Do you want
here,
to intro something they said that the writer has said in an interview about that?
Sure.
You don't like those kind of interview spoilers. I'm sorry, but I love reading interviews, so I'm going to have them. He said that someone asked, "Are we going to see Mark Gatiss, the character, the guy that plays Tycho Nestoris, again?" And they said, "Hopefully."
Who's Tycho Nestoris?
The guy who's speaking.
The main guy at the Iron Bank.
Okay.
They said, I think they said it was his only appearance this season, but hopefully he'll come back again. So. It leaves it open. It's not really a spoiler because we don't know, but they would like to have him back.
To be clear,
he's a pretty big actor.
To be clear, in the books, the difference there is the Iron Bank approaches Stannis rather than the other way around.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Okay. Which I guess is why you're saying the idea of Stannis going to ask for help doesn't fit his character.
Yeah, in the books they approach Stannis.
Right, and
I will
partly
say
because the reason they approach him is because the situation's a little different, and the Crown intentionally stops paying the Iron Bank for reasons that I won't go into, but there are reasons.
Where
good or
in the
bad.
show, they're running out of their gold mines are empty.
Right.
So that's a little. They're getting to the same point.
Tywin
I guess,
explains that
yeah.
a big part of why their relationship with the Tyrells is so important is because they have the finances to be able to help them
Yeah.
keep these loans, paying back these loans. Tywin understands why it would be a disaster for them to stop paying, but perhaps the rest of the Lannisters don't understand that. Cersei clearly doesn't understand. Cersei wasn't in the dark about their finances in general.
Yeah.
And obviously Tywin is not spreading that news around.
Yeah. I wonder how much Olenna knows. Is she?
Well, she's
how
aware
she is of the debt that's there. She certainly knows that the Iron Bank is a force he can't ignore.
Right. She's probably not aware of the level of debt. But
Right. I wonder if
she must know there is debt, though.
Right, and she must know that's part of why Tywin wants her allegiance. Like how much.
She's probably.
What are the limits to it? You know, I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine something like that escaping her knowledge. Yeah, she's well informed. She's also perceptive, and she could figure that out even if no one told her.
Trying to size all this up, one thing I was thinking is that I don't know. It seems odd to me that this bank has more trust in their ability to get their money by encouraging a war. You know what I mean? It seems like Tywin's like in power now with relative control. Things are relatively stable. He's marrying this wealthy family. He should be able to pay this money back. Maybe they know his gold mines have run out. Maybe they know that or something. But I don't know what they know.
As he said,
But-
Tywin is old, and they don't
Yeah.
know if they can trust whoever takes.
But they
over.
do know that Stannis is broke. He doesn't have an army. You know, he doesn't have the. You know,
Yeah.
but so if Stannis does start a war, and even if he wins, it's not. There's going to be a lot of destruction in the wake of it. Men are going to be killed. Resources are going to be used up. Gold's going to be spent. He's not going to be able to pay the money back either. I guess. I don't know. I mean,
They're thinking
I don't know where things are going.
they're thinking very long term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he'll pay
Now-
them back the money they gave him and the money that they loaned him.
Yeah.
So they come up ahead there, and they just gotta wait. The Iron Bank lives eternal. It's just a matter of
Yeah.
time. And
I guess if they're
It's not those individual bankers for
it's
who
not
get paid
even
back,
right.
right?
They're not even expecting Stannis per se to pay them back. They just want to make sure Westeros pays them back.
Yeah.
And Westeros under control of Tywin may or may not pay him back. Westeros under control of Stannis
for the
will, so.
reasons given. I thought basically the way that you just now, Sean, explained why people like Stannis or why people respect Stannis, I thought that was encapsulated perfectly by Davos's speech to the bankers. He's like, look, this is why I support Stannis. This is why other people should support Stannis. This is why you should support Stannis. He lays it out. It's pretty convincing, I thought.
Yeah.
It's a good argument. Tywin is old, and look what happens after Tywin's gone. Look who's in charge. Do you really think that these people are going to be able to handle it? And he's got a great point. Mace Tyrell, Cersei, young Tommen, Jaime, none of these people have shown any competency at all. In fact, they've shown the opposite of competency. They've shown that they're bad at their jobs in terms of certain types of management, financial management, their level of knowledge. Tywin, why has Tywin kept Cersei in the dark about these things? Because he doesn't trust her. He doesn't think she's capable of managing. He openly calls some of her decisions stupid in front of the council, like sending away Sir Barristan, for example.
Yeah.
Which was stupid. And Tyrion realized the same thing. Like, that was a dumb thing
Cersei
to
does
do.
a lot of things, makes a lot of knee-jerk reactions, makes a lot of spiteful decisions, and
She has a more narrow view of things. She
Yeah.
doesn't see the big picture very well.
yeah.
Which is true for a lot of people. It's not just Cersei, but
And Jaime's
Cersei
not
happens to be in
ambitious.
charge or close to in charge.
Jaime's a great knight. He's not trying to be Lord. He's trying to avoid
right.
it.
He has no interest in, or he doesn't spare a thought for counting coppers, as Robert would put it. He's in that, come from that same cloth. He wants to do masculine things. He cares about his honor, and he cares about fighting. He doesn't care about running a kingdom. He cares about protecting people and doing his job. He doesn't care about
I agree. Running a
management.
kingdom is a feminine thing. I would like to say that Tycho and Astoris, I thought it was a pretty good choice to have them be a bit more vanilla looking, but in the books Tycho has a long beard that goes to like his waist. It's like a rope-like beard.
Yeah,
it's
and
very
his huge
weird.
and his huge hat.
And his big hat. Yeah, he's a very big hat. And if you look up pictures of him, like artwork of him, he looks just like a ridiculous cartoon character to me. But he's very big hat. But it was a good choice. The Iron Bank sounds like a pretty severe, serious thing. It doesn't sound like they would be dressed like that. But it would have been a very funny contrast.
They probably want to make him look more professional. They want to,
These are
He was. I certainly enjoyed his calm demeanor. His very, this is how it is. This is how it works. This is what we're doing.
These are the numbers.
And I thought that I really liked the way that scene summed itself up, and I liked what it means for the future. The banker Tycho tried to put it to them. He said, "Look, the war is over," and I was like, "No, it's not." If and he did the unspoken comment that he doesn't make there is, "Look, if Stannis was, look how well Stannis has hung on. He's done. He's lost his army for the most part, but he's not done." And you can clearly see that. We're here. We're still working on it. And they haven't taken him out. Despite his reduced strength, they still haven't been able to get rid of him. That shows how chaotic things are.
Even if Stannis loses, he's still going to keep being a drain on resources. He's going to keep fighting this.
Yeah.
You can either be on the other side, and maybe you win, maybe you don't, but you're still going to have your resources drained, or you can help us out.
I do think it's interesting that in this episode, and we have a series of scenes that shows basically people that are a threat to the throne. We see Asha there, fighting with Ramsay and all that, which we'll get to, obviously. And we see, before that, we see Stannis. And then right after that, though, we see Daenerys. That's what we see. And then the last half of it is just all, in King's Landing. But it would have been interesting. I think another thing they could have said to help convince the Iron Bank is if they said, look, there are still Greyjoys fighting. If I don't know how fast, information seems to pass really, really quickly, so I don't know how much Stannis and Davos and the Iron Bank know, but the Iron Bank of Braavos does not want Daenerys and with her dragons to conquer Westeros. So that would have also been a really good argument for them to say. It's like, you want us to go there and settle things before Daenerys comes here. You don't... I think that maybe they just don't know that much, even though somehow King's Landing is getting information in the time of an episode. I'm not sure.
That's a good point, and also it speaks to... It's something that they could have pointed out. You're right. He could have said, look, Stannis is still alive, the war's still going, and you've got the Greyjoys in open rebellion, and they've splintered off in the kingdom. Stannis has beaten the Greyjoys before. He's beaten them in a major naval engagement during Robert's Rebellion, so that's something else they could have hung their hat on with regard to selling their plan to the bankers.
They even did part of Davos's pitch to build up Stannis. He did say he's a proven military commander, but it would have been nice to have
mention
specific examples of
he's defeated in the past. So it's time for a quick history lesson about Braavos, based on what Ashea said. Now, the reason the bankers will never back Daenerys, even though she's obviously a strong contender for the throne, despite how far away she is, and despite some of the objections of people like Cersei in the scene that we'll analyze in a bit, the Braavosi people. The city of Braavos was founded by escaped slaves who escaped from Valyria. So these were people who hated dragons and hated Valyria because they were enslaved by them. Braavos was founded as a place that was a refuge from Valyria and its dragons, and the location of it was a secret for a long time. And when the location was finally, so to speak, common knowledge at the time, it was discovered that it's been put out in the center of a large lagoon where dragons have a difficult time accessing it in general. So it's also a hard place to assault for anyone, especially dragon riders. So
basically, Braavos does not like dragons.
Yes, they have a cultural hatred of dragons and Targaryens in general, potentially.
Much like the Myronese and the Slaver's Bay people all do not like dragons.
Because they were conquered by them, exactly.
All that said, would they give her any credit for freeing slaves? If that's their reason for their hatred,
we'll see.
Would they come around?
That might be a conundrum for them, won't it? So we'll have to see how that turns around. Now, one other final thing on this scene, we spent a lot of time on it, but I just wanted to point out that some people might find it a bit implausible that Stannis could go from this kind of strength to being a legitimate threat. And they might think, why would the bank switch their allegiance? Well, first of all, the bank has to have a high opinion of itself. If their support is so crucial to Tywin and the crown and all that, imagine the double whammy of the Lannisters losing that support and it being given to their enemy. Think about how medieval warfare works, especially the vassal lordship and feudal relationships. If Stannis were to, say, land with an army again, even if it was mostly mercenaries, he would immediately be put in the position of fighting whoever he lands next to. And he may land in a place where there's somebody that isn't necessarily hostile to him. If you're a lord who's a bit neutral, who hasn't potentially married yourself to the Lannisters or any of these families, just someone that has, kind of played both sides a little, no one that's has deep loyalties to either side, which most of Westeros is going to be. Most of Westeros isn't hyper loyal to the Lannisters or the Baratheons. They're doing their own thing. They care about managing their own lands, taking care of their own peasants, worrying about their own families, their own money situation, all that. Stannis shows up on your doorstep with an army saying, he doesn't attack you right away, because that's not what Stannis would do. He shows up on your doorstep and says, hey, who are you going to fight for? So, are they going to fight for Stannis because Stannis is right there with an army already? Or are they going to stay loyal to the Lannisters? Who do you think they're going to stand for? The person that's threatening them right there. That's who they're going to fight for. Not exclusively, of course. This isn't how every single house will react. But you got to consider that people will react to what's happening to them in the moment. Stannis is right there with his army. They're going to fight for Stannis unless there's some way for them to deal with it another way. It's all about pragmatism, and that's what most lords of Westeros will do. They'll do what's best for them. They're not going to hold up these ideals of loyalty. Some of them will. But for the most part, they're going to do what's best for them. And if Stannis is sitting there with an army on their doorstep, they're going to fight for Stannis. If Tywin is there, they're going to fight for Tywin.
I imagine also, I don't know how well Stannis would be able to politic this or what other counsel he has, but there are probably some lords that are more likely to be loyal to him in the first place or less likely to be loyal to Lance in the first place. That's where he could land first and get those people on his side first. And I can see how...
It's also true that the North is more loyal to their Lord Paramount than other regions because of the tragedy that's happened. So, they want a Stark back, because they're so outraged at what happened. So they're even more loyal than, say, the Vale would be to, or say the Riverland, the Riverlands especially, it's just torn up. But the North would be a really, if he's Stark, if he uses that as his campaign speech.
Yeah.
They'll like that.
So let's move on. We've got we spoke a lot about that scene, and then of course
Salladhor
we see
Saan
the scene finishes off with Salladhor Saan.
The infamous brown pants.
This is how the infamous brown pants. This is how we learn that the banking maneuver was ultimately successful. All of a sudden, Davos has a big smile on his face and money to pay Salladhor doesn't look too happy with it, though. He's like, okay, I'm getting my money, but I don't know about this. He doesn't look like he's thrilled with the whole idea. Anyway, we're moving on to Yara, Asha Yara here. We're going into... Now, something a bit confusing about the geography. This is something we talked about offline to try and figure this out. The Dreadfort is on the east coast of Westeros, and the Iron Islands are on the center west. So how Asha could have sailed there is a little confusing, but what we've settled on is that it seems that she circumvented the entire continent. She went around, sailed up the Weeping Water, which is a river that runs alongside the Dreadfort. It's the only thing that really makes sense to us. We can't really fit anything else to it. It's not that strange if you think about it, unless you don't consider the possibility that they sailed all the way around. If you don't, you say, where did they sail? How did they get there? So that's the only thing that makes sense. At first, I thought that was just a really awkward, but in retrospect, I think it fits well enough.
I remember even wondering a couple episodes ago, where does she think she's going? And they're like, oh, Moat Cailin. Roose Bolton is sending Ramsay down to Moat Cailin because he had a hard time getting through that land. And the Greyjoys still occupy that. Okay, so she'll probably go there. Ramsay will go there. There'll be confrontation. But it didn't seem like Ramsay was, trying to conquer some land. He was, having sex and giving Theon a bath. He seemed like he was at home, and so it made me feel like that she must have gone to the Dreadfort, which meant she must have just...
Roose then, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where Roose was for all this.
Yeah.
Where is Roose?
I was a little... we should have checked to see other shots of the Dreadfort. I was a little interested.
Yeah.
But yeah, where was Roose during all this crazy fighting, and while Ramsay's giving Theon baths? I don't know.
Yeah,
some
that
supervision.
was a bit odd.
And Fat Walda's there too. Like, yeah.
Now, one thing I forgot to mention, by the way, folks, at the beginning of this episode, I had put to Twitter that suggested that any of you all who wanted to ask us questions about the episode, about our review or the episode itself, to tweet them at us. I did collect several questions, and we'll be answering those right before the credits and answering some spoiler ones after. And also, I wanted to point out that we will be continuing to review the preview of next week's episode that they have at the end of the episode after their credits in the show. But we're going to do that at the very end of the episode. In other words, we're going to do our credits, then we're going to do book spoiler discussion that relates to the TV episode, and then we're going to review the previews. Because the previews, to some people, are the most spoilery thing there is. Even more spoiler than talking about the book stuff. Thanks to regular listener Rishi for that suggestion. We're going to go with that. Mm-hmm. So anyway, back to Yara, Asha, the Dreadfort, and all that. Mm-hmm. So Reek is... One thing we see that Reek clearly has... He is Reek. He's not Theon anymore.
Fully Reekified.
He's fully Reekified. He has full-blown Stockholm Syndrome. He's afraid of escaping. He thinks it's a trap. He thinks, even though it's clearly his sister coming to rescue him, he bites her hand. He doesn't want anything to do with this escape.
Yeah, I thought it was a really great scene when he was panicking and yelling his name, and it's just the directing. It just really was a scene full of panic. Like he was just freaking out. I felt like Theon could hurt himself and how much he was freaking out right there. He was
good
just
acting,
struggling, and it was good acting from him. And of all the Reek and all the Ramsay stuff, this was my favorite. I would have to say it's not torture porn. It's a little bit more psychological later, and even that I liked more than some of the other stuff. But it was also during the bath scene in particular. It was very hard to watch. It was very unpleasant for me. I generally just didn't like it. It was, it was kind of like it's weird sexual psychological torture. I don't know. I'm not sure how Theon thinks about him and what Ramsay's thinking, and it was all really weird to me. And even more turned off of it because I know that there's a thing where people ship Theon and Ramsay, so this is just that really strongly. Like, do you love me? And I'm like, they're feeding into that, so whatever. People can ship whoever they want, but that scene was very disturbing to me.
And it's all helped by Ewan's just ability to have that creepy grin on his face.
He's a great actor.
He is got the handsome creepy guy grin down perfectly. Asha
also was being super badass when she badass in a bad way. First she leads the charge, which wasn't a good way. I liked seeing her. She's
a warrior woman.
She's a warrior woman. But then when she the guy leads her down there and she just slits his throat. It's like you want to be sympathetic to her, but at the same time, it's hard to be sympathetic when she's just doing that.
You're reminded that she's an Ironborn
killer. Yeah, you're reminded
killer.
That she's an Ironborn. That is exactly what he did. You're like maybe rooting for her to save Theon, and you're like, oh wait.
She's saving Theon, but this is just this is her warrior code. Her the way she read the letter to her men before this mission about. They did this to you. They did this to your prince. That means they did it to you. Our whole culture is being spat on right now. Everything they do to Theon is an insult to us. They're torturing us.
And then she sees, he wants to be a Reek. Okay, my brother's dead.
Yeah.
She's over. There's a lot of little tiny plot holes I felt in this episode. I mean, in the scene, rather. Not the least of which was that Ramsay is shirtless and fighting, and no one teams up against him. Ashley doesn't just throw her axe at him.
Yeah, he's sitting there with the key, reaching, and she's an amazing axe thrower, and she just watches him.
I felt like he should have just been dead, but I guess people should often just be dead after fighting, period.
Yeah.
So it's not that ridiculous, but I just kept being like, come on, just run for him, one of you Ironborn.
It had a lot of typical problems that TV/movie fight scenes have, but. So we can't complain too much because it's not like it's worse than anything else. But it did have some issues, some reality issues, I thought.
The opening, I liked the opening of this scene. I thought the tension, the boat and the rowing and cutting back and forth between Ramsay.
Ramsay ramming? Ramsay ramming?
Yeah, Ramsay ramming. And the troops on the way, it was, the music, reading the letter and everything. But it was a little anticlimactic, finally they're like, I have you now. Oh, yeah. Cut to the next scene. All right, we got to get out of here. You're like, what over there? Just kind of
It's
guess
like they skipped over.
How
a little
fast
bit.
can you run? Really, really fast.
Yeah.
in general, I would rather have more dialogue and drama and interaction between characters than more like, gore and blood and violent action scenes or whatever. But if you're gonna give enough of an action scene to present us with a climax between these two characters, and we've been waiting for the season to come together, and then cut to you can't like
see
skip
them
that.
fighting the dog.
Yeah.
They know how much people hate animal violence.
I just have to chalk it up to a battle went down and she lost and ran away and
dogs can't run
someone
on
came
water.
around a corner and whatever. But I did think that though that it was the interaction. The presentation of Theon was really good. I think that what happened in a couple different moments we saw there, basically Theon is not Theon. He's Reek. And
right.
he's scared to even he's scared to accept hope. The idea that someone would help him, the idea that anything pleasurable might happen, anything positive or hopeful, he doesn't even want to have it. He can't afford to have hope. He is truly broken.
Ramsay got the hope, even removed the hope from him with that fake escape.
Exactly.
Even that is taken from him.
He couldn't even trust that this is a trick. I'm just going to get in more trouble. That this can't work out. A bath? No, not a bath. No, I can't. It's a trick. You're still going to beat me, aren't you? No. He's still just waiting for anything. He just can't. He can't accept anything positive. He's not who he used to be.
The way I'd like to explain the way that action resolved, I think I made sense of it. When I first saw the scene, I thought that it was a little strange. By the way, one thing I would love to have hanging on the wall behind us would be one of those cool-ass Kraken shields that some of those Ironborn had. Those were cool. Or a great costume addition there. And I mentioned that in particular because quite often people don't have shields that they should have. There should be a shield. They don't have it. It's just, sometimes they just don't bother with shields. And shields are really cool because you get a chance to have a sigil on there. And
the season has been better with the sigils, period. And I think that's a choice that they made in previous seasons not to have that as much, because when the relief and the excitement that we see when Dany unfurls her great Targaryen banner, or when Stannis is sailing with his ships, we see the Greyjoy. It's all near each other at once is very, very exciting for me, at least.
Little marketing there. So more marketing opportunities for them as well. But so what I think happens with the escape, to try to explain what they basically cut out, is that remember that Asha shows up there with about 50 guys, and of course not all 50 of those guys are rushing to prison to try and free Theon. Some of them are fighting other Dreadfort men off somewhere else, probably around the area where they broke into the castle, perhaps atop the battlements there. And that's why I think Ramsay runs in the room all covered in blood, because he's already been fighting other Greyjoys, or rather other Ironborn. They're not all Greyjoys. Now, and of course, this is how Asha is able to escape, is that they go back through the same way they came in, and her men have held off this area, something like that. And what you can assume is that very few of them survive, because when they run back to the ships, there isn't even 10 of them. And there were about 50 when they went in there, so it seems like probably most of them died. And that explains, I believe that is a reasonable explanation for what happened.
She might even be able to chalk it up as a victory, too, if 30 of her men died, killing 200 of Roos's men, and fuck it, we lost Theon anyway. All right, let's call it a win while we can and get out of here.
Now, this also makes sense that the men at the Dreadfort would be less competent than you might think, because Roose took his men to war, and his army is still trapped in the south because they haven't been able to break through Moat Cailin. That's a big part of what's going on with Roose's general situation.
Yeah. Much like Winterfell was that Theon just took Winterfell.
The men left behind are the young guys and the old men, the ones who are crippled, who've taken injuries. They're guys who are only fit for guard duty. So it does kind of make sense that these would be not the best fighters. And Asha did specifically bring some of the best fighters that she had available. Yeah. So
that's what she said.
She did. Some 50 of the greatest Ironborn killers and blah, blah, blah. So it does make sense that the Ironborn would be, even if they're outnumbered, would be able to do a lot more damage, plus having the element of surprise as well. So anyway, it's a good case of maybe they over-dramatized the violence and did some things a little silly.
Didn't dramatize it enough. We're throwing that axe.
Yeah. But I would say that it's you can explain a lot of it pretty satisfactorily, even if they didn't show it. So let's move on.
Yes.
Let's go to this nice little sheep scene here, or goat scene rather. We've got a little boy sitting there looking over the edge, and I think you can kind of tell what was going to happen here. You got a little random goat herder, and because they're
Well, did you think, Sean, watching it, did you think a child was going to be killed there, or did you think it was just going to be goats?
I thought that it was just going to be goats. I didn't expect the child to be killed, but it would have been more moving. It would have been more tougher for Dany to deal with.
Because you brought that up, I believe, in a past episode. You discussed the possibility of something like that happening, like the dragons
Innocent
getting out
people
of
being
control.
killed by the dragons.
Right.
Yeah.
And it may have been foreshadowing, having the moment where you see the child kind of backing up on his legs, and the shadow passes over, and the dragon kind of regards him, and it's almost like the dragon's like, I could eat you, but I'd rather eat one of those goats. The goat system, that's just tastier. You might be tasty, but I know that's tasty.
Speaking of, Drogon is a very wasteful dragon. He burns enough that that they have bones to bring back. So he wastes at least one goat, but he only flies away with one goat out of all the ones he burned. So she needs to have a talk with him about wastefulness.
He might have come back around for a couple more passes.
Yeah, he still missed one goat no matter what. That one with the bones that they brought.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But
so the point is,
we have Dany. They're holding court after that,
which is
you have
great.
a point about the goat thing, or can we move on?
We can let's go ahead and talk about the
we
court.
have Dany holding court, which at the beginning of it they read her title. And then later on, we find out she has to do this 212 times. And I'm just like, I hope she doesn't introduce herself every time, because she has a really long title. And Jorah is not sitting down.
Yeah, I want to say two things. One, I had a similar thought there. Jorah and Bannister are both just like standing there being all cool in her armor and stuff. And she's like sitting there in her pretty dress. She's like, 200 more times? We're going to be here all day. And I'm just trying to put myself in Bannister's place and say,
yeah, Barristan's like,
hey, can we take our chest plates off for this?
I gotta
bring me a chair. And there's also like 8 soldiers in a room just standing at attention. They're just gonna be there like all day.
Missandei's standing there as well.
Did they get thirsty at some point?
Oh, those are unsullied, man.
Break?
They train that. Like, they stand out in the desert all day. They train just for that.
But there is a look.
That's nothing to them.
That Jorah has where like Daenerys says 212 more times, and then like it goes like cuts to Jorah, and he like looks at her a little bit, and you should rewatch it when you see it. It was very funny to me.
The other thing I wanted to point out is that introduction, that title introduction, by the way, happened 2 more times in this episode. Happened with Stannis. She was like, Lord Stannis, take a seat. And Davis was like, not Lord Stannis. He's king of the Andals, and da-da-da-da-da. And Tommen does it when the trial starts also.
Yes, that's true. Daenerys has the longest title of them all, though.
Mother of Dragons,
Breaker of Chains, She's got all that, so she has them beat.
So now we are introduced to Hizdar Zolorak, who, this is, of course, something we'll be discussing Hizdar Zolorak a bit more in the spoiler section. There's some changes to his character so far, at least from what we've seen to this point, from the books.
So we won't go much into what we think his motivations are or anything like that, because we just have too much knowledge of him, and we have seen so little of him that we don't know if he's being honest right here, or if he's presenting a face, or what.
Or a little of both.
Yeah, or a little of both. That's also true.
It's potentially that he's bringing across a legitimate moral complaint to mask some sort of plot, or not. This is really how he feels.
Sounds like Cersei.
In the books, he doesn't request that she takes any of the bodies down, but Daenerys does order them down eventually, because they're just flies, and it's just kind of a health hazard.
Right. So we're not obfuscating what we know is going to happen, because this is not in the books. This scene is not in the books. We don't know how it's going to play out, so it's cool. It's a new surprise for us potentially.
I felt honestly like this scene, and maybe I should go back. Maybe Emilia has just not had a lot of great Daenerys scenes recently. Most of her Daenerys scenes are her being commanding, but I felt like this was some of the best acting I've ever seen from Emilia Clarke in the show, when she's listening to Hizdar, and she is, first she's like, I have to be strong, I have to be like iron, I cannot bend, I have to just be the ruler here, and then she just softens, and she gives in eventually, and you're not sure if she made the right choice, or you lean towards her having made the right choice, but if you give these Meereenese an inch, they might take a mile, and that's what she's thinking at the time. And she was just, you could see all of the conflict going on in Emilia Clarke's face.
Yeah, I agree with that. Her face was very expressive. She had this oh my God, I did something horrible. I was trying to be just, and it didn't. She sort of argued back with him, but she didn't have a lot of heart in her argument. She realized that she was overwhelmed by Hizdar's plea and how her own thoughts that maybe I did kill a sort of innocent man.
I feel like she had the defenses prepared for Jorah or Barristan. She, you know what I mean? She knew what they were going to say, and she knew what she was going to say back. But now here's a person who was personally touched by it. She didn't know what to say to him.
And you raised this issue. You raised this exact point in the previous episode. And I was thinking to myself, Sean said this exact thing. He's like, what's going to happen when some of those, like maybe one of those slavers wasn't such a bad guy, or maybe some of them were decent guys.
Against it,
and maybe they argued against it. That's exactly what happened. And I'm sure you were pleased to see that they covered that. That they were like they addressed that issue. Like some of those guys were probably innocent. They're human beings.
Fair,
and they all be bad guys.
To be fair, that guy argued against crucifying children. He didn't argue against them slaving. And so that kind of like she doesn't just give in right there. And she has to really see his emotion, and she's thinking like these horrible things happened to my family. You know.
Obviously, I'm not going to condone slavery, but it is still, if it's part of a culture that you're born into, it's different from... It's not like Daenerys was born into this culture where people were crucified all the time. No, she decided to do this. You know what I mean? Yeah. These people were born into culture. This is the way things were. And some people within this... It's not like magically one day everyone decided slavery was bad. Yeah. It takes took thousands of years, all of human history. It's only in the past couple hundred years that we've been like, wait, maybe we shouldn't have been doing this. Yeah. And even then, it took war and generations. And, some of the people in this culture of slavery aren't necessarily evil. Some of them are trying to break out of it, and some of them got unfairly punished. And
I can imagine how difficult it would be to try and even raise the issue of not having slavery anymore in a culture that's literally been... Think about this. In the U.S., we had slavery for a couple hundred years. In certain places in Europe, they had it for a lot longer, and in other cultures, it's been around. In the Slavers Bay area, it's been thousands of years they've had slavery. It's beyond the kind of ingrained that exists in world culture in our world. It's hard to even grasp how ingrained that is. Once again, this doesn't justify it, but still, it's hard to break a cultural habit that's existed for, say, 5,000 years.
And it is connected to another thing that Barristan was trying to point out to her, is that these people, now that everyone in the city is your subjects now. And there might be some bad people, and there might be some people who deserve to be punished, but be careful. Give them a trial. Make sure they are. Because how you punish some of these people is going to affect other people. And we see that happening now. The son, the family members of these people are like, hey, And
she will make mortal enemies of them rather than political allies if she doesn't treat them with some level of respect and consideration.
To be fair, there is, even if she had treated them all very well and all these things, for all we know, they would have just seen that as a sign of weakness, and they would have just jumped all over her, and she would have just been drowned in all of their demands, and it could have turned out better, and it very likely would have, but it might not have necessarily, and she decided to go with being just being more commanding, and she not merciful, basically. She decided to answer it with justice, her idea of justice, and I don't think I agree that it was the correct way to do it, especially not how they showed it in the show, but I don't know, I'm certainly definitely not positive that if she had gone the other way that it would have turned out at all better.
Yeah.
It's a hard situation, period. You're coming into a culture where they hate you and everything you stand for, basically. So it's going to be hard for her to make friends with them, period.
And in a world where might makes right, she was just proving that she is mighty.
Her whole thing is that she has might with her dragon. So maybe she just has to, she has to play into that she has might, which is the strategy she went with.
Now, it's also interesting because this is exactly what she asked for. She decided not long ago, I guess it was last episode, that she's going to stay in Marine and rule and decide to learn how this all works. And this is her first big test. She's realized that she can't just cut a swath through the old guard. It's going to have moral consequences. It's not just going to be that simple. She's going to have to figure these things out. She's going to have to make friends with people that she doesn't like. She's going to have to compromise. And hasn't had to do that very much at all. She's been able to be uncompromising with almost about everything. Yeah. She's starting to realize that it's not simple. There's going to have to be some nuance. Ruling is not about just do this, do that, this is the right, this is wrong. It's gray. George R. R. Martin throughout A Song of Ice and Fire shows us the grayness of human nature, about the grayness of politics, the lack of black and white situations in all of life. Dany is confronted by that as a young person. She's just starting to learn these things, and some people find these things, a lot of book readers think Meereen is a little boring. And I think that already, I'm not one of those people, by the way, but I do think that you can see that they're changing a few things here to maybe to make it more compelling. This whole Hisdar Zolorak having moral quandary and all that, that's not in the books once again. So it's interesting to see that they're going to go a different direction with this. And I'm very curious to see what they're going to do. I think it's I have high hopes for some of these changes, because they are going to try and make it a bit more compelling on a human level. And I think that's a great aspect of A Song of Ice and Fire in general. And they're kind of following along George's footsteps in a way that he didn't himself do it.
Mm-hmm. So, unless we have anything more to say about that
Shall we move on?
scene,
Yeah, let's go ahead.
We move right into a small council scene, which is another person chafing at having to rule or having to have responsibilities, which is Oberyn specifically. He's sitting there, and we go right into that. Master, I thought he said sheeps at first, I have to say, and then I realized it was ships. He's like, we decided that long before you arrived.
Yeah, Mace Tyrell, what a tool.
He had such great lines this episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved Mace.
As predicted, he would be more. As we predicted last week, there'd be more of him starting now,
yeah.
and he did not disappoint. He's disappointing, but he did not disappoint. Let's put it that way. His character is disappointing. The actor and portrayal, perfect.
Yeah, then we had, of course, the ridiculously fast messages being passed, and mentions of Sandor and the Riverlands.
Yeah, so we have Sandor. The word of Sandor killing the men at the inn has filtered south.
Which is perhaps interesting to Oberyn there.
Yes, you saw
the name of Clegane. He's
the camera went on him. He's like, Clegane, huh? And you're like, He's like, do I hate that guy? He's a Clegane, I guess so, but
yeah, do I hate that guy?
I don't actually know him personally.
And then of course they talk about Daenerys, which is the ridiculously fast messages we were talking about. But it's still interesting to hear them talking about Daenerys and actually having information in the book. They're just like, rumors of this and rumors of that, and Varys is maybe spreading a little misinformation. And this, it's just straight up, they know.
And Cersei is, of course, kind of downplaying all this. Yeah. And I think there's a couple of things going on here. One thing that she's downplaying, one reason she's downplaying this is because she's partly, I think it's just a little bit of stubbornness. She doesn't want to accept that this is a problem. She's got, there's enough to deal with. And part of this is my own knowing what she says in her own head from the point of view chapters. But also, she does not want people to lose sight of what's happening now. She is focused on the trial. She wants all her thoughts are on making sure Tyrion. Yeah, that's what she cares about. She's like, we don't have time for some woman who's thousands of leagues away. She's not a threat to us. Come on, people, focus on what's happening here. We have real problems. We have Tyrion to deal with. So I think that's a big part of it. That's her focus, and that's typical Cersei. She focuses on the things that she perceives as problems and really completely downplays anything else that other people see as a problem. That's just kind of how she operates. She's got blinders on, and it's really on display here in this scene. She's got this huge threat that's developing far to the east, and she just doesn't see it as a threat. And that's silly. Of course it's a threat.
There were two interesting Oberyn things when they're talking about Daenerys. One was that they talk about the second sons there, and Oberyn was a second son, and there have been other mentions of the second sons, and he doesn't mention it at all in this episode, and I don't know if he was. They mentioned that he went to Essos, and so I'm not sure if he was a member of the second sons in the show, or if he's downplaying that for some reason. I don't know why, because I don't think it's really that secret.
And it wouldn't matter. Probably wouldn't necessarily matter a whole lot. It's not like.
So I think maybe he just wasn't a member, and then I'm not sure. They certainly had him spend time in Essos. I'm not sure what the deal is with that, but he was a member of the Second Sons in the books.
And they're a sellsword company and he would have been a member of them more than 15 years ago. It's probably unlikely that even if he probably doesn't know people that are still there. Like
it's
the commander
not
has
really
changed.
relevant. There's not some plot point
Officers
to happen
have changed,
there that might be changed. But
it
there's
did seem like he was trying to hide something. Varys is like, how long were you there? 5 years. What were you doing there? I travel. He didn't give a straight answer.
I thought
you know?
that too. I was like, why would they want to hide that he was a member of the Second Sons? And I was almost like, should I even mention it if it's going to be a plot point later? I don't really think that it's going to be, but I'm sorry if it was a spoiler and it's like some big plot reveal. Oberyn was in the Second Sons. I'm sorry. But another funny thing when he said that he had seen the Unsullied, he makes his. I saw a very funny joke online where he's like. He's talking about the Unsullied. He's like, not very good in the bedroom, though. And then the next thing was like him saying, I have a lot of sex. It's like, that's basically what he got across there.
And then, of course, which leads into the really interesting and I thought very solid discussion of desire and Varys's...
But before that, we have Tywin sending a letter to Marine.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Before
that's
definitely.
Like we need to not skip over that because that has huge implications. Of course, Tywin is a big proponent of letters being more valuable than swords when they have the ability to be. Sometimes you just have to fight, but sometimes a letter can do a lot more, as we saw with the Red Wedding. The Red Wedding developed as a series of conversations of back and forth between Tywin and Lord Frey and a few other people, perhaps. But he said himself, a letter, why kill 10,000 people, in a war when you can kill a few people through a few letters and avoid all that strife. And it's kind of harsh, but you can't exactly deny the truth of it either. It's kind of a moral quandary. So you wonder what he's up to here, and you gotta wonder if he's got some sort of plan to undermine something Daenerys is doing, or if he's got some other way to manipulate the situation, or if there's somebody he wants to send a message to specifically. We don't know what he has in mind. Some more thoughts on that in our spoiler discussion at the end of the episode after the credits. But Shay and I will not say too much on that. We'll let Sean give his thoughts. Go ahead there, Sean. What do you think about all this? Do you have any thoughts on what Tywin might have up his sleeve there?
Second Red Wedding.
The truth is, I was also mostly thinking about Tyrion. I was like, all right, let's get to the trial. Daenerys is 1,000 miles away. You don't have to worry about her. She can't even take care of her dragons. What's going on with Tyrion? I'm not sure. I do feel like Tywin is usually like a step ahead of what's going on, and
that's true.
Although I feel I suppose here's the thing. There's been talk of dragons before. He even in that very memorable scene when Tywin walked up those steps to Joffrey. It's like, dragons. Look here, little boy. Da, da, da. And because Joffrey's like, but she's got dragons. He's like, don't worry about dragons, But even now, he's like, yeah, dragons. But she has an army. Armies win wars. That's what I'm worried about.
She's unsullied, yeah.
He's blowing off these warnings from the north, though. Now, maybe partly because it's not as direct a threat to him, it's a threat to the north. You know what I mean? Maybe eventually
there's a buffer there.
Yeah.
And a wall.
But an army from the west with dragons could come right to his doorstep.
They're a threat to King's Landing, not to...
And it's maybe I guess more trusted information. I wonder what Varys thinks. Does Varys know? He must know there are reports of White Walkers in the north. Does he not care? Does he not believe in White Walkers? I wonder what his take is on it. I wonder why he doesn't see that as a priority.
We wonder that too.
Yeah.
So, is there anything?
Speaking of Varys.
Yeah. So let's talk about this next
Varys
scene.
is of course
Varys
staring
and
at the
Oberyn.
Iron Throne as he's done. There's been multiple scenes where Varys has just been standing in the throne room, looking at the throne.
It's like his meditation. He sits
no
there
one
and
is
he clears his
suspicious of
thoughts.
Varys, despite the fact that he stares at the throne all day long.
He himself, of course, is not a legitimate claimant in any way. No one. There's no chance at all a eunuch sits on the Iron Throne
King
as the
Varys.
king. That is just out of the question.
Down.
However, Varys is obviously capable of
backing somebody.
Yes, having the throne is not, as has been pointed out multiple times, having the throne is not the same thing as being the king. Having the throne, being the king, is the same thing as having power. You know what I mean?
Right. Even a king is beholden to the people that put him in power. And even just as in modern life, we see this in this episode, how important the bankers are. The bankers are, of course, really important in our world as well. Bankers buy politicians. They bankroll wars. Sometimes they bankroll both sides of a war. Anyone who's in a position of power is at least beholden to the people that put them there, the people that are keeping them there. And this is very much on display in this episode. We have Daenerys trying to put herself at the top of a power structure that does not want her there, and she's having to make that work. We have Westeros in the throes of several different potential leadership changes and tumultuousness, with the kings dying off and infighting with several different kingdoms. So we see a lot of different things happening from the top of a power structure and working itself down, and seeing how that support system is maintained, and all the things that go into that support system, whether it's money, whether it's soldiers, whether it's dragons, whether it's having the right advisors, whether or not those advisors are loyal to you. All these things are in play in this episode.
Poison,
yeah. The fact that if you have great leaders running your cause, and that's a key part of your success, well, what happens if one of your leaders just drops dead or is killed by somebody? How does that change the picture? In that first scene, we saw how that was huge. Davos points out that, look, if Tywin's gone, the Lannister picture changes dramatically. They go from having an amazing leader to having terrible leadership. And the Bank certainly took that as a major point. They agreed with that point. And I think that we're going to... That sort of thing is permeating this episode. I think it's a big theme. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about Oberyn and Varys a little more.
Yeah.
This is another thing we're going to talk a bit more about in the spoiler discussion part.
Yeah,
after
we
the
have
episode.
Varys is asexual, as
Yes.
we learn, whether because he was just so young when he became a eunuch, or whether he was actually just asexual, period, which is certainly nice to see on television. It's some representation. I mean, sure Varys is a eunuch, but he's saying that he was asexual before he was a eunuch, which I like to see. I also loved Oberyn's reaction to the thought that someone just didn't have sexual desire. It was very good acting. It was very funny to me.
Especially after he completely pinned... Yeah. He figured out where he was from by analyzing his lack of accent, and
from Lease, especially not having sexual desire. That's where they have pleasure houses aplenty.
Right, they train pleasure slaves there specifically. Lease is known for its bed slaves and all that. It's a city of pleasures. So, which is potentially why Varys is so anti-desire and all that. He was raised in this culture where desire is celebrated, perhaps, and he sees how destructive it is, and it's almost like it's traumatized him. It's like he has PTSD for other people's desire.
Am I not remembering something, or in the books did they mention? Did Varys mention his lack of desire? No, he did. I don't recall that at all. I didn't think I recalled it at all, and I had never considered that, and I like it, but
he certainly faults Tyrion for how his desire is putting him in such danger. He's like, you're risking so much just to spend time with Shay and to go around behind people's back. It's the level of risk you're taking just to satisfy your desire to have sex and to be cared for a little bit, to have some human contact. Varys sees this from so many people, how it's their biggest weakness, and it's like a philosophy he has that it's not going to ruin him, and of course he's also less susceptible to it given his own situation. He can't indulge in it nearly as much. I mean, he could, and he can indulge in drinking, he could indulge in eating, he could indulge in song and attention or acclaim, but he's not interested in any of that. He is bottom line. He is focused at the throne, staring at it.
He was interested in revenge.
He is. That's true.
Yeah.
He's also interested in not letting people know what he's interested in. He likes to he's keeping his desires and his plans close to the chest. He plays the Game of Thrones well, but part of the reason he plays it so well is that he doesn't let other people know just how deeply involved in the game he really is.
Gotta say, I would love to see Ilaria and Varys, lounging, gossiping, and whatnot, because he said Ilaria would like him a lot. But yeah, we'll see them just eating grapes. And
so, of course, we'll have a little more to talk about with that scene at the end of the episode. Do we have any more thoughts on that? Shall we move forward to the biggest part of the episode?
First,
the lead up to the trial. First, we have Tyrion and Jaime, and Tyrion reacting to chains being put on him, and Jaime kind of saying, "Yeah, I got to do this." And Tyrion kind of admonishing him, saying, "Really? You have to do this, huh?" And to me, I'm thinking, yeah, actually, Jaime, what happens if you don't put him in chains? Are you going to get in trouble if you just disobey that order? Is Tywin going to fire you? Is he going to put you in chains? Cersei really going to be like... See, I wonder if Jaime were to just ignore that order, how it would go. And I think Tyrion kind of in his mind, he's saying to Jaime's like, look, if you... Thinking the same, he's kind of realizing, he's like, look, if you were to flaunt this just a little bit, it would be showing support for me. And it wouldn't matter. Like, what am I going to do? Am I going to jump over the podium and kill someone in the middle of the trial? Like, why do I need to be in chains? It is kind of funny. Like, why does he need to be in chains?
Yeah. I guess, yeah.
He
probably can't do much damage. To be fair, Tommen walked right past him.
Yeah, that's true.
But, yeah.
I went back and watched the... after last episode's reveal with Lysa and Littlefinger, I went back and watched the episode where Tyrion was on trial.
Yeah.
At the Vale.
Oh yeah.
And because I wanted to have that perspective of how she was, how the interaction went with her and Tyrion and Caitlyn and everyone else, just with this new perspective, And for one, it seemed like she believed that this trial wasn't over, the poisoning of Jon Arryn. This was over an attack on Bran. So it wasn't like she knew Tyrion was innocent or something like that. But a lot of the guilt being thrown at Tyrion, she knew wasn't fair.
Yeah, it was completely invented, yeah.
But anyway, it was the parallels of that trial in this one, where Tyrion's like, all right, this isn't a real trial. This is just a show to get me in trouble.
Just like the last one.
Right, yeah. So, I don't want to skip ahead too much, but leading up to the trial, Tyrion was like, when Caitlyn had him arrested, he was like and his hands were tied. I don't remember if it was chains or ropes or whatever it was, but he requested to be untied. And she was like, of course. He's like, why not? What are you worried about? What am I going to pick up my sword and kill you all, run away from you on your horses? I'm a little midget, Yeah. And I think I seem to remember they did untie him, but at the same time, I also feel like, how's it really going to help Tyrion either? You know what I mean? Jaime's just like poking the beehive to disobey Tywin for what? Because for one thing, it might be worse on Tyrion. It might be more embarrassing to have him tied up in front of everyone. I don't know. I feel like it's understandable for Tyrion to be upset with Jaime. But I also
it's an emotional reaction. He can't help but feel like his brother's betraying him.
But I also feel like realistically, Jaime really can't do anything. Anything he did or tried to do is honestly just hurting Tyrion more and hurting himself too. He's in a better position. In fact, this is something I was going to say later on when Varys' bit comes up. He's in a better position by not trying to support Tyrion too much. Down the road, I can help you more if I'm still in good with Tywin, Anyway.
So, one thing that I like that you brought up the other trial that Tyrion had, because by now Tyrion has to really have... I think this is part of what's fueling his bitterness, despite all the reasons he gives. He's got plenty of reason to feel bitter about the judgment. But ultimately, just as a human being, his reasons for bitterness are just kind of staggering. He did save the city. All those things he said are true. He saved the city, and as he's walking out, a guy yells Kinslayer at him in the trial. This is twice that he's been brought into a room full of people that thinks he's guilty for something he didn't do. And in fact, it's a little different in the Vale because they have no reason to like him. But in King's Landing, they have reasons to like and respect him. He's done a good service to them. He did a great job as, hand of the king for a short term there. And so his level of bitterness towards humanity, he's got to just be so hateful now. He has no allies, basically, and he's done so many things right. He's been a good person relative to the average Westerosi lord, the average commoner, etc. Any of these comparisons, he's a objectively solid moral person. Obviously he's done plenty of bad things, but he's gray like so many other these characters are. Compared to them, he's pretty much, if anyone's a good guy, Tyrion is probably fair to put him in that category, despite some of the bad things he's done. So he's got to be just so bitter over his treatment. This is twice he's gone into a trial where they believe he's guilty before he's even said a single thing in his defense. It's the opposite of innocent before guilty. He's guilty before trial even starts. People thought Tyrion was guilty before he'd even been accused of this. They're like...
It's even worse here because people who know he's not guilty are accusing him of doing it.
Yeah,
or
you're
blaming
right.
him for it.
Because they can't help him. They're like, well... Everyone, they see the way the wind is blowing. Yeah, everyone thinks he's guilty, and we can't save him. And if we try to help him, they'll just think that we're working for him or something silly like that. Yeah, it's really, it's pretty sad. It's a really kind of hopeless situation in a sense for Tyrion, just realizing that no matter what he does, people are just not going to like him. He just isn't going to find. No one's going to love him, and then it especially the one person who he had this fantasy that she cared about him. And that Tywin and others tried to point out to him, look, if you think a whore ever is going to love you, you're an idiot. And Tyrion, this has just come crashing down to be true for him. He's like, that fantasy that he had built up that Shay actually cared for him. Maybe she did, actually. But from his point of view, she just totally betrayed him. And how's he going to trust people? Assuming he is alive much longer. How's he ever going to trust anybody? After this, he doesn't trust his brother anymore. He doesn't trust his family. He already had trust issues, and now everyone's against him. Like everyone, he's got to feel really abandoned and alone. So, I think that's one of the kind of the underlying themes here of the scene that is really important to notice, but is maybe not as to the forefront of what's in our awareness. So, I really wanted to draw attention to that. But of course, there's so much more to it. Sean, what are some other thoughts you had on the scene in general?
Yeah. I don't know. I'll try to talk about them as they come up. The scene in general I thought was good. Yeah, the scene in general I thought. I'll hold back on general thoughts.
Okay, well, Shay, let's start with some of the.
We go through different people testifying.
Let's start with some of the individual the witnesses. Yes, Shay, you can start with that.
Yes. A lot of talking. Anyways, Maren Trant, anyway, you can go on ahead. Sorry, I got all turned about by the conversation.
We first get Tommen announcing his title and then turning it over to Tywin.
Yes.
Right, and then the first witness that they call is
Maren Trant.
Maren Trant.
Yep, they talk about Sansa beating Sansa Stark, shots of Jaime throughout that. Jaime would have had similar experiences to that as a Kingsguard during the Mad King's reign, and that was, his conflict. And so to hear that Tyrion spoke up for Sansa Stark, who was being, Joffrey was acting like the Mad King. He was a Mad King, and he was beating her and aiming a crossbow at her. Of course Tyrion is going to speak out. Jaime must be thinking, of course Tyrion's going to say something about that. Tyrion is so soft-hearted, and how could he keep that to himself? And I was really glad they mentioned that.
There was a moment I seem to remember when someone tried to chastise Jaime for something, and for not taking action when the Mad King did something. I think it was killing Ned's father and brother. And someone it said something about Jaime, and Jaime's like, "Yep, I did just stand there." So did 200 other knights and nobles. Mm-hmm. Tyrion wouldn't have stood there. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Tyrion wouldn't have stood there. Yeah. And so when Jaime hears that about Sansa, he's like, "Of course, Tyrion said that to Joffrey. Of course, Joffrey shouldn't have been doing that." I feel like Jaime might be thinking like Tyrion's being a better man than I was, and that might be even more why he went. Besides, he loves his little brother. Maybe that's also part of why he's trying to save him.
Yeah.
And then we have Grand Maester Pycelle after that with all of his list of poisons. It's a very long list of poisons. No one's like, you have a lot of poisons, Grand Maester.
But tirelessly going for
the main thing that got me there was that Pycelle had the necklace. They had found Dantas Hollard's body with the necklace, which we talked back and forth about a little bit. I'm of the opinion that I felt like it was too careless of Littlefinger to have just not cared about Dantas Hollard's body and the necklace and to left the necklace there on accident. Like, that is ridiculous to me. Though, to be fair, he just didn't care about Sansa's hair. So this Littlefinger could be more careless, but I think personally that he meant for them to find Dantos's body and the necklace. My only thought is that I feel like that is also foolish of Littlefinger, and it implicates Sansa really strongly, and I feel like if he can not implicate Sansa that strongly, which he could have just easily done, he wouldn't have done it. So I'm not sure what Littlefinger's exact plan is there, and why, if mainly like, okay, maybe that didn't hurt Littlefinger that much in his plans and he can get away with it, but I don't think it really benefited him that much either, so I don't know why he did it.
Yeah, I remember when the scene happened, that I didn't even think too much about it. But I was talking with someone, and they thought that it was kind of weird that he would, like, leave that necklace with Dantos. It was, like, incriminating. And I remember kind of blowing it off. I'm like, it's just some little boat at sea. It's just going to be lost at sea. Dantos' carcass will be eaten by ravens, and no one's going to find that boat. And if they did, they wouldn't recognize that body. And if they did, they wouldn't recognize that neck. No one's going to connect all these dots. No one's even going to find that boat. So not only did they find the boat, recognize Dantos and the necklace that Sansa had, and I'm like, all right, well...
it would be so easy for him to have sank the boat if he wanted to. So it
it
has to be on purpose.
Or have thrown the necklace into the water instead of onto the boat. So many things. Right.
He specifically threw it onto the boat. You got to think that was
on purpose. Again, it doesn't make sense that why does he want Sansa implicated in this murder? It doesn't. I don't understand. I mean, again, I don't know. I don't know what Littlefinger's plan is. He doesn't want me to know. He won't tell us. He just wants everything. But it just seems really odd to me. And there's further implication of Sansa in this too, from Shae later on. She says that Tyrion and Sansa planned this together. And I don't know if or how much Littlefinger is behind her there being as a witness, but it seems like it's part of someone's plan to make sure Sansa is guilty here. And I don't know, it doesn't make sense.
Well, let's talk about that actually, because first of all, we were told that Shae had left. She had gone on a ship and left. Of course, that turned out to not be true. Now, we book readers kind of assumed that would happen, even though there is no Shae being sent away in the books at all. That she was just brought to the trial as you would expect her to be. There was no Tyrion trying to send her away first. So it takes a bit of a different way to get to this point. So we knew, of course, that Shae would be there, but we didn't know necessarily how this would play out. And one thing is pretty clear. Well, maybe not clear, but one thing that we need to look at and consider is that why isn't she gone? Did someone bring her back? Did she come back on her own? If she came back, if someone else brought her back...
Did she ever leave? Truly.
If someone else brought her back, then you got to think that someone is behind this. Someone is at least manipulating her, either threatening her or bribing her, or perhaps a little of both. A little of, if you do this, we'll do a little something for you. If you don't, you're in trouble. There's no middle ground here. It's kind of what you would expect. There is no, but if you don't want to participate, go ahead and leave. That's probably wasn't an option presented to her if any of these things were presented at all. So it's something to consider. Who's behind this, if anyone? It's kind of unlikely to think that Shae is just doing this on her own, just to get revenge on Tyrion. Now, this is a major particular question that we got when we asked for questions before recording this episode. A major point, several of our listeners, House of Black and White, Rebel, a couple other of you whose names I forget, specifically wanted us to address Shae's motivations here. And it's a difficult thing to get at because it's not just her motivations, it's the people that may or may not be behind her and who they are. Without being able to say who those people are, if we even know, it's difficult to be able to get at those things without knowing who's pulling those strings. So, Sean, let's hear some of your thoughts on that.
I just assumed that she was in the same position that Podrick was, that Tyrion was afraid Podrick was going to be in, and so sent him away. And he sent Shae away too. He probably, he was probably more afraid of her just being murdered or otherwise, tortured or whatever. Who knows what Joffrey might have done or Cersei might have done. But he was just trying to protect her and send her away. But he was basically trying to protect Podrick when he sent her away too. It's like either Podrick is going to have to testify against me, which he can't bring himself to do. He won't do. If he does do, he'll suffer internally, whatever. Or they're going to kill him, or he can just leave. He just needs to leave, And I just assumed that Shae tried to leave. Whoever it is trying to frame Tyrion. was on to who she was and where she was going and got her and brought her back and threatened to kill her and Tyrion and everything she loved unless she testified in this way. And it might have even been a little easier for her to go ahead and do it because she's angry at Tyrion anyway. You know, whoever's threatening Podrick, no, I won't do it. We'll give you a bunch of money. No, I still won't do it. We'll kill you if you don't. I still won't do it. You know, but they might have been like, we want you to testify against Tyrion. I hate Tyrion. Well, yeah, come testify against him. No, I don't want to testify against him. We'll give you money. Yeah, oh, no, I just want to... Everyone leave me alone. We'll kill you if you don't. Okay, fine, I'll go testify against him. You know?
You still give me the money?
Yeah.
But,
So basically, Shay is, she's kind of ruining Tyrion here.
Yeah,
he's kind of melting as he's hearing her testimony, and you can see that all the things people said, this is just crushing him.
We did skip, by the way.
we skipped.
Cersei was after...
I don't think the ordering here is terribly important of which order these guys come
okay.
out. I was specifically
Well, yeah,
not worried about what
it's just good for us to not. Otherwise, we sometimes just forget.
Yeah, I'm afraid we'll just talk about Shay for the rest of the episode. And not get back to...
Unless you have something to say about Cersei, the only thing I have to say is I loved when Mace thanked her, and they shoot to the they go to the Tyrells, hearing Mace thank her for her courage, and they're just like 100% done with their father, and they're so embarrassed that that all these people have to see their father talk.
They're both so disgusted. Yeah, they're just like, oh, they rolled their eyes.
And then Varys never forgetting a thing. He's an elephant.
Yes, Varys is an elephant. Yes.
And so
Pycelle also. There was a funny line that Pycelle had.
when he shocks the crowd.
He tells so many lies, but this is the biggest whopper.
I had to see if I read it right.
There never was a
very rare poison used to strike down the most noble boy ever put on this earth.
Yeah.
And he looks at Tyrion so accusingly, like he's so serious.
How dare you do this to Joffrey?
But my favorite part about that is that the crowd is shocked, and I just love that they're like shocked that he would say such a thing about Joffrey. But
that's how I imagine too. It's like they're really shocked about the revelation, but it's fun to imagine them being shocked over that lie.
And then we of course have Tywin and Jaime.
Yeah. I was gonna say I felt like that the case was building because we start off with Meryn, who says this stuff about Tyrion, but Tyrion's like, but you were torturing a girl. I can write your testimony off. You know, I got a defense for you. Yeah. And so then we go to Pycelle. And Pycelle almost discredits himself by talking Joffrey up. Everyone's like, all right, I'm sure everyone in the crowd's not, but the audience and Tyrion, and probably even Tywin and Oberyn and other the key characters, they probably know, okay, he's just saying what he needs to say.
So she's like, damn it, why did you say that, Pycelle?
Of course Cersei is going to have the most damning things to say. And by the way, I'm trying to remember, did she lie? What was the debt? What was it?
Well, she lied about some things. She didn't lie about that. Yeah,
Oberyn said, what is this debt that Tyrion is wanting to repay? She was sleeping with whores, and I wasn't going to let him. He couldn't. He wanted.
She was downplaying it, though, because what really happened was Tyrion. She threatened Shay.
She killed Rosalind.
And she killed Roz.
Was it Roz? Yeah.
Well,
one of the other
Roz.
girls. That's right. And Tyrion needed to pretend like he cared because he was trying to protect Shay. That's right. And so that was the debt.
Yeah. So Cersei basically did a lot of creative exaggerating in some places and downplaying
omitting her own murder. Right.
But she did a good job of it. It certainly presented it in a way that would be shocking and would make Tyrion look
Tyrion look bad. He's whoring around. She's also the queen. Everyone, she's the mother. This is the witnesses. Or it's building the case. Then we go to Varys, who we think is Tyrion's ally. Maybe he has some. No, Varys. And Tyrion even wants to question first. Like, hold on a second. I didn't expect this. Can I ask a question? I'm like, sure, one question. Charles Dance, such a good job being so stern.
Yes.
One question.
Speaking of good acting too, Jaime does a lot of great acting without saying a word. They cut to him and he has all these great different.
Because Jaime is realizing he even told Tyrion, that's why we'll have a trial. And I almost can't believe that Jaime's so naive to think that it's going to be a real trial. But it's clear. It becomes clear to Jaime this is not a real trial. Tyrion is doomed. He needs to go help him. Because Varys is like, I do. Sorry, man. I do remember. I
remember that you're doomed.
And I'm still going to testify against you. What's that say?
So that's how screwed you are.
So then we get a break, right?
Then we get a break.
Tywin and Jaime talk, and they make a deal. Which
which plays right into Tywin's plan.
I couldn't tell if Jaime was like, damn it, he got me.
I think
I already said yes, no takesy backsies, you know?
Yeah.
I didn't want you to send her to the wall. That's not what I meant. I wanted a fair trial, but Tywin got me. Oh, well.
that was the quickest accepting of a deal, like in all time. Because I think that Tywin had already planned.
That's how I felt. Yeah, like I said, I feel like Tywin's always
he was
a step
like, he's
ahead.
not going. He's like, he will be
next.
punished as he deserves.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
but you're
You
going to
know?
kill him. He's like,
Accordingly.
he will be punished accordingly.
Yeah.
And that's probably what he meant the whole time. He was
Yeah.
never, so Jaime asked for something that Tywin was
Right.
already going to give.
By the way, Aziz and I have been reading a new fantasy series lately, the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson, and I just wanted to mention to anyone who's read that reminded me of a certain scene. Do you remember? A certain character is convincing another character of something he's already decided.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he's just like, okay, you convinced me. And I had read it very recently, so it just came back to me, and yeah.
That's
I
funny.
love things like that where someone is so impassioned, such an impassioned speech, and
Prepare
then
it
they're
and-
like ready to just fight tooth and nail for something, and it's
The other
it's
person's like, okay.
The other guy's just waiting for them to finish. You can accept.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, all right. Anytime you're done. You done? Yes, I'm ready. Yeah. So Tywin is like done, and then it's just very. It's like, and then you'll go make new Lannisters.
I liked your joke that you made there.
See, they have children named
Lannister.
Lannister.
Yeah, it's
Lannister,
like,
Lannister.
Lannister,
Yeah.
Lannister.
The women too, girls.
Children. All the children will be named Lannister.
Lannisterettes.
How will I tell them apart? Come here,
Lannister.
Lannister. I'll come running. Yeah. So
Jaime tells Tyrion the plan.
Jaime tells Tyrion the plan. And the plan doesn't last very long, does
Shay
it?
arrives.
Yeah.
Shay arrives, and the plan kind of flies out the window.
Music
The
plays.
music playing, you know it's coming. When the music is playing, you're like, who is this going to be? Now, of course,
You
book
hear the
readers,
heels,
we knew
but-
it was going to be her from us book readers. And we knew when the music started that it was going to be that right then that she entered.
Yeah.
Did you catch when the music started? Was that like a clue for you? Like, oh my God, who is this?
I don't know for sure if it was the music started. You were watching with me. I said out loud, I said, it's going to be Shay. And I can't remember if the music had started yet when I said that, but it was definitely the most, like I said, I felt like the witnesses were growing in their damnation of him. And
Yeah.
that was the most. That's the person who was closest to him and has the most knowledge that would be the most damning. And sure enough,
I think
and
it could have been Bronn. It would have been next.
a couple things.
Yeah, it
One,
could
I
have
think
been
it's
Bronn, yeah.
interesting that he wasn't called on. And also, I think it's interesting. There was a moment I thought it was pretty good filmmaking. All the editing, the cameras, the acting, the lighting, everything. I felt like before Shay was even called, before that moment, I was like, it's gonna be Shay. Before that moment, even, just as Jaime is like. I felt like Jaime was maybe even pushing it a little bit as far as their, like, time was coming in, everyone's standing up, the trial's starting, and Jaime's like, Tyrion, come on, I gotta tell you this whole thing real quick, and he's like, just stick with the plan, okay, cool, and he's like, oh, I gotta be quiet, let's go, let's get this thing started, and Tyrion is like, soaking us all in, and there's this look on his face, he's kind of looking at Jaime, he's looking at Tywin, he's looking at the crowd, and it's the look on Tywin's face, looking back at Tyrion. I felt like Tywin... He knew that was Tyrion knew that was Tywin's plan all along to send him to the wall. He knew this whole trial is all a farce. My life's not in danger, but my liberty is. Tywin's got this all figured out. I think the sea was already planted. I think he knew right then. I'm not gonna do this.
He knows his father. He knows how his father's pride works, and he's like,
Yeah.
this is a much better result for House Lannister's image.
He had
Tyrion goes to the wall.
up to this point, his attitude was a little more lighthearted. Much like it was, in fact, at that scene in the Vale, remember the way he got the trial there? Because they just locked him away. They just locked him up in his prison, trying to not to roll off the side in the middle of the night with Warg or whatever that guy
Morg.
Morg,
Yeah.
and Tyrion was like, I want to confess. Confess. Like, oh, he wants to confess. Let's have call everyone in. We're gonna have a confession. He confessed to, jerking off in his sister's soup, and he confessed to like blaming his squire for putting shit in his uncle's boots and all these things, and and everyone's laughing, and they're like, wait a minute, hold on, what about you're trying to kill Bran? It's like, oh, I didn't do that. Like, well, that's what you're on trial for. It was the same thing happened here. It's like, okay, I want to confess.
Except this time he's not he's not laughing while he's doing. He's
right,
not
it
like,
wasn't as lighthearted, I think,
Yeah.
because of Shay. I think he had his quips lined up. I think he knew. I think as soon as Jaime walked away from him, I think he knew. All right, I'm not going to the wall. I'm gonna ask for trial by combat.
Yeah.
And I'd rather die. I'm not giving my life for Joffrey. You know what I mean? I'd rather die. I'm gonna ask for trial by combat. Not going to the wall. I'm gonna make some good jokes here. But then Shay comes on and just totally ruins his life, and he's like, all right, no jokes, I'm pissed.
Yeah.
Fuck all you.
And he was quipping at the beginning of the trial. He was talking about how he's like, he's like, how do you think Joffrey died? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't have anything to do with me. The pigeon
That's it.
pie, maybe he choked on it.
Did you kill Joffrey? Nope, wasn't me. How do you think he died? I don't know. Choked on his food. You're blaming the bakers. Maybe it's them. I just know it wasn't me. You know, he was.
He's still being his kind of flippant self. But then,
Yeah.
once the Shay testimony happened, he was a different man. He was traumatized by that.
Speaking of the Shay testimony, it was some good bad acting from Shay, from the actress who plays Shay, and that it was very good acting to have a character acting so badly, because you could tell that she was, that not all of this was truth. I felt, and you could tell that she was nervous and that she was lying. I also liked when Mace was like, his what? About his horror, his what?
Horror.
Yeah.
And he just sits back in his seat, stares straight ahead.
Oh, I never.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I never
funny.
had a horror. But the other great gem from that was Shay talking about fucking him like it was his last night in this world. And Oberyn's, well, did you?
Yeah, did you?
I was.
This is what the court is interested in here.
Yes.
Just another aside about Mace Tyrell. Regular listener Elizabeth G pointed out that the next line when in the small council meeting, Tywin tells Mace to go get him paper and paper and quill, and she says, "And could anyone else hear the next line?" That unspoken line, and get me a sandwich, bitch.
I think Oberyn heard it.
Yeah, Oberyn heard that. Definitely Oberyn heard it. He noticed it because Mace was already kind of jawing at him about, jockeying for position, and Oberyn's like, "Oh, you're so tiresome," and Mace is taking it so seriously.
Princes
and of course,
don't jockey for position.
no, and lords aren't supposed to go fetch paper and quill, but
I did take note, by the way, in that meeting that he was in more of a position of power. There were 2 people on one side and 3 on the other. And the 2 on one side were the prince and the queen.
Yeah.
And on the other side, the master whisperers and the lord of ships. And
never mind the fact that Oberyn just doesn't stand up, which is a power move right
everyone
there.
stands up for Tywin, and he's just like, he's got his foot up on the table almost.
So then we have Tyrion's confession.
Yes.
Capital T, capital C.
And I think that even though Tyrion may be looking like he's losing a lot here, Peter Dinklage, the actor, may have won himself an Emmy.
Yeah, I hope, but it's going to be a very hard year
he's gotta
with
fight
Breaking
Bryan
Bad.
Cranston,
Well, I don't know if they're submitting him for supporting actor or lead actor or what, but either way, he's going against Bryan Cranston or Aaron Paul, and that's a hard fight for their last season. But if any scene can do it, it is this one.
He'll certainly get nominated at least.
Yeah, he'll get nominated at least, but he has won before. He has won an Emmy
season
before.
1, I believe.
So if he won it for that, he should win it for this. But it's just a hard year. I think that he at least has a shot as a supporting actor, not as like a lead actor or anything like that. He can't win against Bryan Cranston, I don't think. And
probably
even
not.
Aaron Paul is hard. And I'm sure there are other good male contenders that will be there that I don't even know about.
Yeah, I mean, some shows we don't watch.
Yeah.
But he killed it,
Yeah.
and the internet agreed that he killed it. All over Twitter, all over social media, there was just people talking about Tyrion, what a man he was, what a speech, what a great speech he gave, what a great confession it was, how much he just took it all in and spat it back out the way it was meant to be done. Everyone agreed.
I love my favorite comment I saw was Tyrion's speech was my dream speech to my coworkers. I should have let Stannis kill you all.
I should have let Stannis kill you all. Yeah.
I was thinking of Atlas. I thought Atlas Shrugged. Tyrion felt like he's. I mean, even like almost immediately after he was basically imprisoned when he was wounded. Just the whole way, everything he's done, no one ever appreciates it. And,
it's enough to make a man bitter.
I have been thinking.
So you could give us your general thoughts now, and make sure we mention the demanding trial by combat, their reactions, and then we'll finish up with your section and get to our spoilers.
I remember supposing early on that there was going to be a showdown. Was it maybe the second episode? Whenever it was, at Tywin, and Oberyn had that meeting, and Tywin was like, "I didn't order it," and Oberyn's like, "So the Mountain just did it on his own?" It's like, "Yep." You want to talk to the Mountain about that? And Oberyn's like, all right, fine, yeah, I'll talk to the Mountain. I felt like, there's a fight coming between them. And I also felt like once Tyrion had been arrested and was, going to be put on trial, I also was supposing that Tyrion was going to ask for trial by combat again, and so maybe these two things, I thought they would be separate things. I thought we were already going to have this fight between Gregor and Oberyn. But now I'm starting to suppose that that's how this is going to go down, is that Tyrion is going to choose Oberyn as his... although I was thinking about this. What if Tyrion chose Jaime? What if Tyrion said, I want Jaime to fight for me?
Well, there's legal precedent. He wouldn't be allowed to.
Why not?
The Kingsguard is not allowed to defend someone accused of killing the king.
Okay. All right. But,
even though he's part of the royal family himself. Now, the wrinkle there is that Jaime has just agreed to leave the Kingsguard.
Oh, yeah,
although
that's
he
right.
agreed to it under circumstances that are no longer possible.
Except the reason he agreed to it, though, was because he's trying to save Tyrion. And so if Tyrion says, I want Jaime to fight for me, Jaime's already said, all right, I'm not in the Kingsguard anymore. I'll fight for you.
So this is a very interesting situation, how that could play out.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing that I consider, though, is that Jaime might not be able to do it. You know what I mean? Like, especially because whoever gets chosen, Jaime might be able to beat the average man or the average warrior, or even a strong warrior. But is he good enough to beat, another member of the King's Guard right now? Is he good enough to beat Oberyn or Gregor? Or
doesn't look that way, does it?
If Tyrion does pick Jaime, if Tyrion were to pick Jaime, and in who, I guess Stannis or Cersei, I don't know who would pick the other person, but I feel like they're probably going to pick Gregor.
Stannis? You mean Tywin?
Tywin, sorry, not Stannis, sorry, Tywin, yeah. The thing is, I think on one hand, I don't think this is what's going to happen, because I think we're going to have a fight between Oberyn and Gregor. But I think it would be interesting. I think it would be correct for Tyrion to choose Jaime, because I don't think Tywin could let that happen. Tywin can't let Jaime get killed by Gregor in trial by combat, therefore executing Tyrion.
It would be both of them dead, yeah.
Right. Now Tywin has no heirs, you know what I mean? I feel like Tywin just couldn't let that happen. I don't know if it's something that hasn't occurred to Tyrion. It hasn't occurred to him that Jaime's willing to step down from the Kingsguard. He doesn't know that the deal that Jaime made. Jaime might, even if he did know or think or consider all this, Tyrion might not be willing to risk Jaime's life over all this. Good
point.
Anyways, those are what was all stirring through my mind the whole time, and when the episode ended, I was like, it's so bad. For it to not end, I want to know what's going to happen next. But those are the things. Those are some of my thoughts on it. It's definitely been lots of stuff stirred in me here, thinking about what's going to happen and why and how, what Tywin thinks is going to happen next, what Tywin wanted to happen next, how Littlefinger plays into all this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's talk a few questions here, especially since some of these questions relate to this scene. So, as I said, one of the main questions we got from a few users was what's going on in Shay's mind. What do you think, Sean? What do you think is happening in her mind? Do you think that she, for one thing, she loves Tyrion or loved Tyrion?
For one, whatever's going on in her mind, at this moment, is probably different than what's, I don't know how to say this. I know it sounds weird to say, but it's different than what's really going on in her mind. Does that make sense?
She can't speak only in her own voice. There's certainly other motivations.
Not only is she going to be, on some level, probably being coerced by someone, but also her emotions are more intense right now. Her perspective on things will be different 3 months from now, 30 years from now. She might, you know what I mean? Who knows how she'll look back at this moment and what kind of regret she may. Because I can imagine, let's say on one level, she's like, this is my chance to get revenge. She can't believe how betrayed she was by him. Even if on some level she knows that he was just saying what he needed to say to get rid of her, to be mean to her, that she really cares about him, that doesn't make her less upset. Why would he do this to me? Doesn't he know? True love, da-da-da. If he wanted to make me upset, he did it. Well, I'll show him. But a few months or a few years from now, she might have a better understanding of, wow, I really was in danger. Wow, he really did make a big sacrifice to save me. Wow, I shouldn't have betrayed him. You know what I mean?
But if she's just being compelled to say these things, then it hardly even matters. Maybe it makes it easier for her to say those things.
I almost wonder if the same thing is going on with her. This literally just occurred to me. The same thing is going on with her that went on with him. Remember, he had to say the thing. He had to come up with what are the things that will really get her. What will be most hurtful? What are the things that I have to say to drive her away from me? And now that's what she's doing to him. She, you know what I mean? She like had to find the things that would be most hurtful to him, the most, you know what I mean? Exactly why she had to do this? You know, is it for revenge or for protection for herself or for him or for Sansa, or maybe on some level if she can. I don't know. It doesn't seem like she's trying to protect Sansa here. She's trying to throw. It seems like Sansa's getting thrown under the boat too.
I felt like that was the weakest part of Shay's motivations, and I felt like it wasn't that well done. But we'll see what else we see happen. But I felt like they really portrayed Shay as truly caring about Sansa. And then she just throws her under the bus and is just very, just a little extreme in how the kind of mean thing she doesn't overtly say anything mean about Sansa, but
she incriminates her.
She incriminates her so strongly, and I can't feel like if Shay loved Sansa as much as they portrayed her, which I felt pretty strongly like they were showing that throughout the previous, the previous seasons. I don't think I'm alone in thinking that Shay really cared about Sansa and was protective over her. And I just can't see, like, okay, she's being coerced, but I can't help but think that Shay might have just, not been quite as extreme in her incrimination, no matter what.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I think that it might have just, maybe more of it will be explained, but I think it might just be a little bit of bad writing, is my thought. Sometimes it's hard to get that meta about your analysis of things, and it can throw things off, but sometimes you just have to chalk it up to maybe that wasn't the character and that was a writer's choice, and it wasn't fully explained.
Also, I think sometimes a scene is meant to convey a certain idea, and it does. In fact, in real life, sometimes people say things that are meant to convey an idea or an emotion, and the details of what you say might not be accurate, but the idea has gotten across. Maybe we're just supposed to get the idea. Even Tyrion's closest ally is totally turning on him here. And the details of whether or not she incriminates Sansa might have been poorly worked out by the writers, but the point is that Tyrion has no allies. And little hope.
It's supposed to be obscure to us what she's thinking, and they certainly did a good job at that, in that maybe I have certain theories on where she was coming from and whether she was more coerced or whether it was more willing, but you can't be for sure. You can't know. The acting, it was a choice they made. I'm not always a big fan of not being sure what they were going for at all. Like, I like to know what they were going for and if they succeeded at it. But
This is we'll have to see, I guess.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see more of Shay.
Future scenes should at least eliminate it partially, if not entirely.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yes. Any other questions?
Yeah, okay, so other questions. I think the rest of the questions we've either already covered or they are spoilery questions. So I think we are ready to, unless you guys have more thoughts on the last scene, I think we're ready to move on to the credits and go on to our spoiler.
I did have one thing in general I wanted to point out. At first, it was a thought. It's like, wait a minute. You know who's missing? Olenna. Olenna hasn't been here for this whole... And they're like, wait, she said she was leaving. She told Martin she was leaving. But then I started thinking, where did she say she was going?
Back to Highgarden.
Just back to Highgarden.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. To coordinate with...
And now Mace Tyrell is... As we predicted, there'd be more Mace because of her leaving. And so far, good job there. He's I'm enjoying watching his awkwardness.
Yes.
Not as entertaining as she was, but
no, that's true. But
I still am
less
curious.
Screen time too.
She's still a character. I'm curious about what's going on with it.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen a few characters go away and come back.
There's a theory about Olenna that I don't think is going to be true. Going to be in the show. It's not in the books. It's just a theory that people have about her in the woods.
About her not actually having gone back to Highgarden. About her being out there and being nearby to guide Marjorie.
It's just
I don't buy that
some
theory
people
either.
Have said.
But it's
I
because
certainly don't think it's true in the show.
it's partly based on the fact that Marjorie goes riding a lot, and there are people who think, oh, she's
Okay.
going out riding to
Yeah.
go check out. But I don't see the problem with that theory is why. Why does she need to be hidden? What would be so special about Queen of Thorns just hanging out there, staying at court, and advising Marjorie? That wouldn't be strange.
Especially if it would become weird that she wasn't in Highgarden. It seems like people would notice that. Like,
There's that too, potentially. So I don't understand. So that's the thing. I wouldn't say that theory is impossible. I just don't see why. I don't see why they would need to do that. Okay, so assuming that is it for... You said you had other thoughts on the episode?
No, I think that's better.
One other closing thought I had on the episode that occurs to me is we like to sometimes do this, perhaps we should do it every time, is to relate the title of the episode to the scenes that happen. The Laws of Gods and Men is the title of this episode. And I think it's interesting to see the laws of men here are not being upheld. Men, they're not really... This trial is a sham. There are no laws in play here. This is, in a sense, the way people are judging Tyrion. It's almost the laws of gods here.
But
what we're seeing is people are just judging Tyrion on what he looks like and what they think of him, rather than any interpretation of the law or examining the facts or examining what's likely and what isn't. They're just deciding he's guilty.
we see the title again in Daenerys' scenes,
Yes.
of course, in that she's holding court and laying down the law right there.
It's
and
it's a good title.
it's also even slightly mirrored with Stannis and Iron Bank, and that's tied to the laws, and he's going to rule, and is he going to be a better ruler? And it's not as overt as the other two, but it's still slightly related to that kind of thing.
The topic of Kingslayer comes up several
Yeah.
times as well, which is a law of man, sort of an unspoken law. Well, there's laws against killing the king, I suppose, but it's worse than that.
It's an unspoken rule. You're not supposed to kill the king.
Yeah, we don't need an actual law in the books. Everybody knows. Don't kill the king.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Let's start with some questions first, and then we'll go ahead and talk about some of the spoiler stuff from the episode. Now, first question: might the King's Moot be in the cards for next season? Now, I'm torn on that. I don't. Last week I speculated, and this is another question we were asked,
it is.
whether or not it is. Yeah, Shay believes that yes, it will be.
I think it will be. I think
I
that
really
was why
hope it
she
is.
said the prince is dead. My brother's dead. I think that was that Asha has given up on that. Asha is gonna go for it. I think that's what that was supposed to accomplish, and that made it all the more clear to me that they would have the Queen's Moot.
I agree. I think it's more likely. Last week, like I said, I speculated that they would remove Euron and Victarion entirely. That plot line doesn't. It could be cut because it's. I can see how they could get around it, and they need to cut certain things. Why not that? I don't want them to. This is not an expression of what I'm asking for by any means. I love the Greyjoy scenes. I'm a big fan of the chapters as well. So I'm not hoping for that, but I do think it's a possibility. However, one thing that was pointed out to me after I made that statement was that Theon's uncles are mentioned in season 1, just very briefly. I don't even think their names are given, but the fact that the uncles are out there was mentioned, so that's a good thing. Of course, it's interesting, as always, that Balin hasn't died yet.
Yep.
That's a big one. We're waiting to see how that's going to happen. I suppose it will probably happen the same way it happens in the books, but
Yeah, I suppose it'll.
we're not so sure.
this season.
Okay, so another question is, do you think Lysa will admit to sending Bran's killer? Now, that's not actually how it happens. We're under the impression that it was Joffrey that sent the killer. Now, Joffrey most likely overheard Robert saying something to the effect of, it'd be easier if someone put him out of his misery. Of course, I'm quoting the books on that. Tyrion himself is quite sure it was Joffrey. Jaime believes the same thing. So we're under the impression that Joffrey sent the killer, not Lysa. Lysa, of course, tried to have, murder Jon Arryn, but she had nothing to do with killing Bran. Another question. I think Brienne will meet up with Stoneheart this season. More powerful intro for viewers. What do you think? Now, we've addressed Lady Stoneheart before.
I don't think she'll see Stoneheart this season. I do think, or I at least am hopeful, that they will show Lady Stoneheart. I felt really strongly like they should have had it as the last shot of season 3, Mysa, as she's a mother, and what a chilling shot that would be, and it would have, kept Stark viewers like, yes, they're gonna come back and get revenge. I felt, and it would have kept, they wouldn't have had to keep it a secret that Michelle Fairley was still there. I felt really, really strongly that should have been the last scene, and I'll say I feel really strongly again this year that with the title The Children, I feel like she should come back in that episode. That's me. I was wrong last season, and I was very disappointed. So maybe we just won't see her at all this season, but I think it would be great to have in the episode 10, in which case I don't think it'll be Brienne that sees her.
Which, by the way, that mention of the episode is a good segue to something that we had brought up before. We are going to do a Night's King episode. After the events in episode 4, it came to the forefront as a possible topic, especially since it's not a huge topic. It's something that we can slot in there. What we ultimately decided is, even though the episode is already quite a bit of it's written, perhaps more than half of it, I would say, we're going to wait till the end of the season to see if there's any other revelations from the TV show. We don't yet know whether that was what kind of mistake that reveal was. It may have been a completely an early reveal, something they didn't mean to reveal so soon, but may have been just a complete mistake, as in that's not supposed to be Night's King. So that's what we need, is just a little more clarification. We're going to wait a little bit, see what else we learn. Probably episode 10, there'll be some reveals, given the title of that episode is The Children. We assume if there's anything more to learn, that'll be the time to learn it. So look for that shortly after the end of the season, and we'll see what we can do with that. Okay, so other spoiler topics to discuss. His Darzo Lorak situation, that's a pretty big one. They seem to be changing his character. He's a little more sympathetic, which as I pointed out during the main body of this episode, that's a good change, I think. His Dar is kind of, I wouldn't say he's flat in the books. He's just you kind of know what he's about in a sense, and he's not super compelling, I guess you could say. He's a guy. He's a dude. Giving him some emotions that we care about, something that we can, a little bit of conflict, I think that's a good change. I'm kind of happy with that, although we have yet to see exactly what they're going to do with it.
Yeah, we're not sure if we'll find out that was all a face that he put on, and or if he actually he does have a father that he cared about and that happened, or I doubt he was just outright lying there.
Yeah.
So that was a definite change that they made, and I don't think he was just lying, but I feel like we're gonna find out that he has greater plans, and I don't think they'll be painting him as sympathetically as they did in this scene.
Right. There's got to be some black to go with that white there in terms of his character. Yeah. He's got to have some darkness too.
Yeah. The other spoilery thing mentioned there is the Drogon, the child foreshadowing there, and I was potentially thinking if we do get Daenerys in episode 10, we might see Drogon killing a child, because the name of the episode is The Children.
Ah, very good.
So that might happen. It was really good foreshadowing, and it certainly will happen, and I think if it's going to happen this season, it'll be that episode. It would be smart of them.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah, I don't think they're going to do away with the Drogon killing a child.
Yeah.
And that would be the
and I think it will be this season, so I think it'll be the final episode, but I'm not entirely positive if we'll have Daenerys in the final episode. It might be really northern-centric.
Yeah.
Not sure.
Might be. But I believe Dany's been in the final episode of every season, so they'll probably keep going with that. But it's not certain.
Other spoilery thing I wanted to mention was when they were talking about Daenerys, when they were talking about Targaryens, and Oberyn was at the small council scene, I thought the shots of him were very interesting, because what does Oberyn think of this? And are they foreshadowing anything with the Dorne plot line there? And it's just a little interesting.
And we have Varys' line, "Not all of us are princes."
Yeah. Yeah, and then it's so funny because not all of us are princes, and then Oberyn says, "You are from Esso,"
Yeah,
which
the way
is,
he pauses there.
The pause is funny, and if you didn't know, there are theories that Varys is a Blackfyre.
Yeah.
And, of course, as a Blackfyre, he wouldn't be a prince, but he would be descended from princes, or, if the Blackfyres were ruling, he would be a prince, but...
part of the theory is that his blood is why that sorcerer cut him to have access to king's blood, because if he is a Blackfyre descendant, he would have king's blood. So... Yeah, it's possible. Certainly, Varys' background is certainly mysterious, and
his name is Varys, which is
certainly
somewhat Targaryen-esque.
It's more. I would say it's actually more Essos-ish than the Targaryen thing is the AE.
It's true.
It's the YS thing is all over Essos. There's a lot of other examples of people who like Aris Okard isn't even from Essos, and he's the RYS. And there's a lot. I actually went through one time and looked for a bunch of RYS names, and there's quite a few that have nothing to do with the Targaryens.
Oris.
But the AE thing, that is exclusively a Targaryen convention. Rhaegar, Aegon, Aenys, all these things. Rhaenys, etc.
Valyrian, but yeah.
Yeah, there's a few that don't fit. So that's a developing situation, and I definitely am curious how the TV show is going to tackle Varys' background. So we'll just keep our eyes on that. Now, more about Varys, but from a different perspective. Varys doing what he has to do in terms of the trial, and saying what he has to say, because there's no reason for him to, sink his own ship with Tyrion. And him talking about how he never forgets anything. Now that's going to come up. That's interesting, because what is going to happen? Is this part of his lead into recruiting Tyrion, so to speak, to perhaps push him towards Dany's cause? Now, so in that sense, it even makes even more sense that Varys would make sure this wedge between Tyrion and his family is complete. So that is in his best interest to make sure that even though it maybe seem like he's being disloyal to Tyrion, keep in mind what his ultimate goals are. And having Tyrion as an ally rather than as part of the Lannister faction is certainly in his best interest. Not only because he's an effective and capable guy, but because he has knowledge about dragons, and because he has proper blood. We're not going to get into the whole is he a hidden Targaryen thing.
You should watch our Varys and Illyrio Part 1 and Part 2. Part 1 is spoiler-free. Part 2 has spoilers. So if you're listening to this, you don't care about the spoiler-free, but it's still good to watch both of them. We should have had a plug for that in the spoiler-free section.
Yeah, we probably should have.
But anyways, we did have one thing from the previous episode, spoilery thing, that we forgot to mention, which is the Jojen burning hand stuff.
Oh yeah,
People
we meant
had
to come back, and
questions
we did forget to talk about that, even though we said we were going to address it. Now, it could be at one point, and I looked for this, and I just could not find it, partly because it's a really difficult reference to find. And I even thought we referenced it in a past episode. Now, Jojen talks about the power of fire and the power of heat as well. And I can't exactly remember the context, but it made me think of that, even though I couldn't remember the exact quote. And it also makes me think of him foreshadowing his own death, which of course hasn't happened in the books. Well, maybe it has, if you subscribe to the Jojen paste theory. In any case, whether you subscribe to the theory or not, it seems that his doom is somewhat imminent. All this today is not the day I die business is clearly leading up to the today is the day I die.
It made me honestly wonder if there was a chance that they were going to change some plot lines and kill Jojen off. I didn't think it was that likely, but it is possible now that they would do that. I feel like they want to keep more people there, but they might just not want to keep Thomas Brody Sangster on retainer for a whole lot of nothing.
Yeah,
so
that's a good point.
It's possible.
He's already starting to get sick. He's had the seizure.
Also the thing that he was very sick and seeing his death made me think that it was possible that they would just kill him off. And Bran would still have people around him. He would still have Mira and Hodor, and as we know, he would be with Bloodraven and the Children of the Forest. So there would still be things for Bran to interact with. Jojen isn't necessary.
Right.
But
I like what you brought up about the whole contract situation. That's something that always has to be kept in mind. As far as when Stoneheart is going to appear, that's a factor. Rather, it makes it more likely that she'll appear at the beginning of a season rather than at the end because of a contract situation with Michelle Fairley and all that. Now, it's not that they don't have a little bit of leeway with that, but that is a real-world issue that certainly applies that we have to keep our minds on. We can't just imagine the best part for them to appear in the story, because that's not how it's going to work. They're bound by other responsibilities and other factors. So I do think that that's a lot more likely to happen next season. However, I do think having Brienne be the one to first encounter her, which was the way the question was phrased to us on Twitter, I do believe that is correct. That does have more meaning to have Brienne be the one to discover that, because obviously Brienne has sworn things to Catelyn, and even though she believes Catelyn to be dead, she's still trying to live up to that. She's still trying to follow along on her quest. So that'll be a very momentous occasion, but probably next season. Okay, so I think that is all of the spoiler discussion we have from that episode. But we do want to talk about what is coming up in the next episode based on the previews. So if you don't want to hear about our discussion on the previews, now's the time to shut this off, and we'll see you next week. But if you want to hear about our analysis for the previews, well, stay tuned for the next few minutes.
one quick thing. Daniel Portman confirmed that he is a good horseman. As
Oh, yeah,
we
that's
theorized, theory. Last episode, he tweeted saying, "I'm a very good horseman," and the trick is, blah blah.
Make it look like the horse is leading him. But
We're also officially a sponsor of Team Podrick.
That's right.
He's
History of
approved it.
Westeros is a sponsor of Team Podrick. That's
Yeah.
right. So.
Anyway, so the preview.
And we were disappointed that he was not in this episode. What is going on with that?
Yeah.
This episode is almost perfect, but you can't have a perfect episode without Podrick.
So yeah, we start off seeing Tyrion in prison with Jaime, berating him basically for not going along with the plan. It was all going to work out perfectly.
Not so perfectly
yeah.
after all.
And then, of course, we see a shot of Gregor Clegane cutting a man in half, just cutting a man, which is hilarious because Sean was like, I don't know how the trial is going to go and how the combat's going to go. And I don't know if if Gregor's just going to cut Oberyn in half. But then in the preview, we just see him just cut a man, which was funny. Well, not funny at all. Truly, but
funny, not funny hard.
Yeah.
Funny,
It was funny because he just theorized that, and then we see it, so I couldn't help but wonder what Sean's thoughts were on that. Then we see Daenerys and Dario.
Daenerys and Dario, yes.
Yeah, just a little chat.
There'll be more of them.
Yeah, and conflict between her and Dario and his Dar and Jorah. And
which brings us to
square.
a major point, a spoiler point here, which is Tywin's letter. Is Tywin's letter going to be the method for Jorah being outed as someone who was spying on Dany before? We know that Jorah became loyal, but it's the reveal through Barristan in the books that drives the wedge between them and reveals that Jorah was a spy for quite a while, even going so far as to reveal Daenerys' pregnancy. So we know that Robert and Ned, when they argued over Daenerys being pregnant and sending an assassin, that whole argument came about because Jorah is the one who filled them in on the fact that she was pregnant. Now, they probably would have found out eventually anyway, but Jorah was passing information like right in the moment. He was feeding them quite a while. So now we know Barristan can't be the vehicle for that reveal because Barristan wasn't on the small council in the show, whereas he was in the book. So that's how he knew what was going on with Jorah. So this letter from Tywin is probably going to be...
Yeah, it's probably him saying Jorah was passing information.
Yeah, so...
Probably, but I'm not sure what else he could do in such a far-off land that would actually accomplish anything besides that. So it's probably it, but we might be surprised. I don't know who else he could contact or what else he could do. Yeah,
it's certainly that letter. It says to me he's going to do something to stir things up, and that seems to me the most likely thing that he can stir up is driving a wedge between her and her counselors. Because, as is pointed out, Varys himself points out that that's one of the things that is in her big thing in her favor is that she's got some good leaders helping her, some good counselors, and that. If it was just her, they'd have less to worry about. Cersei points out, she's just a girl. Like, why are we worried about her? And Varys says, well, she's got good allies. She's got smart counselors on her side. And he probably wanted to say, hey, I'm about to give her another one. About to send Tyrion over there, too. Then she'll have another great counselor on her side. But
funny.
He's not about to give that away just yet.
Yes.
So
we also see Arya and Sandor. Not much
brief
to talk
glimpse
about
of
there.
that. Sandor takes his armor off apparently, for some reason.
Says something about silver stags. I'm just a bunch of silver stags.
He's a reward walking around.
That's right.
And we don't know how that's going to play out because obviously his arc has been changed somewhat significantly. Perhaps he's at this point in the book he has already been mortally wounded and left for dead. And as we know, he doesn't actually die. We're 99% sure that he is the gravedigger on the Quiet Isle that Brienne encounters. But that is, of course, not 100% sure. But we're operating under that assumption.
It's as good as.
Yeah, it's as good as.
As it comes to theories, that one is just.
It's almost as strong as R plus L equals J, I'd say. So how is he going to end up getting to that point? So maybe something else has to happen. He has to get injured some other way, or we'll see. Maybe they'll change that entirely.
They've setting it up for Arya to have changed her mind a little bit more on him and for her to keep to her hating him.
Yeah, and so
especially with smacking her.
Yeah,
and insulting Syria.
You don't
I feel like they've
Syria.
been playing that back up after having her starting to warm up to him. Now she's cooling off again. We also see Selyse and Melisandre, with
Yeah.
Selyse looking into the fire to see what she can see.
Talking about Shireen a bit as well.
Oh, yes.
And then we have
Snow Castle.
We have the Snow Castle, which is a big
and
one. So
Lysa and Sansa, which I'm actually surprised about. I didn't think it would be the next episode. I felt like
yeah, is that going to happen?
Yeah,
is that going to be is Lysa going to die next episode?
that's what it seems to be. It seems pretty
think you're
strongly,
right.
but I felt like it would have been better to have it later in the season. Maybe somewhere between episode 8 through 10.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
I felt episode 10, I felt like they should have hammered in a bunch of cliffhangers. And all three of those episodes, to be clear, like the 8, 9, and 10 will have cliffhangers. But I feel like the Sansa, Lysa stuff could have been piling on to the end of the season cliffhanger. And I'm not...
And how's it going to do? If they do kill her, then what is the rest of the Eerie plot going to look like for the rest of the season?
Yeah.
What are they going to do with that? So that's
It's possible
very
that they
interesting
don't kill
possibility.
her next episode, and that you're going to be very concerned about Sansa, and then the next episode, it'll happen later this season. But it looked
pretty strongly like
looked like it
next
was going to
episode,
happen
yeah.
next episode, and we'll see how that works with the pacing and whatnot, and certainly the other episodes are going to be very, very exciting. But
Yeah.
yeah.
What else do we have?
Well, just nice to see the Snow Castle.
Yeah, they're very nice. It looks really
Yeah.
nicely done too.
Yeah, it did. It looked great. I think that's all I have in terms of spoilers in the previews, and
I think that's it.
yeah, we always seem to forget something.
We always do. There's always so much to cover. And,
Yeah, sorry
and,
if we mentioned something we were going to cover and we didn't, but we'll cover it next week then.
Indeed.
If you
So,
comment about it.
If we forgot to answer your question, just remind us, and we'll answer your question next week. So, and if you have any questions about this episode, of course, do not hesitate to send us a letter, a Gmail, a letter. Yeah, send us a snail mail. Anyway, so that's it for today, everybody. Thank you again for tuning in to History of Westeros podcast. We'll be back next week, and of course, we're working on some regular history episodes in addition to the Night King episode that'll be out later after the season is over. We've got our Sons of the Dragon episode that we might get out before the end of the TV season. We'll see. It's turned into a fairly big episode, like a lot of them are. So look out for that in the near future. And tune in next week. Thanks again, everybody. Valar Morghulis.